Welcome to this week's special presentation titled Finding the Best Stocks in 3 Clicks. My name is Todd Schaefer. I'm the Manager of Research at VectorVest, and I'll be your presenter this evening. For the past several weeks, Angela Akers has been reviewing the proprietary indicators in VectorVest and the related analysis and information we provide on over 16,000 tickers every day worldwide. I pulled this quote from an essay Dr. DeLito wrote on November 10th, 2006 titled, How I Use Stock Viewer. Dr. DeLito wrote, VectorVest is designed to conduct a factual, objective analysis of stock data and transform it into information and guidance. All of this information and guidance is stored in Stock Viewer. Stock Viewer is a gold mine. Our job is to find the gold contained therein and extract it. This is not hard to do. In fact, we can access it with just 3 clicks of the mouse, and tonight, I'll show you how. So let's begin by moving into the program. And here are your 3 clicks. From the home page, we'll go to the Viewers tab, click number 1, click Stock Viewer, either here or in the toolbar to the side. That's click number 2. Click number 3 will be to sort the data to favor your investing objectives, and that's the subject of my presentation this evening. So I'm going to start by moving our toolbar over so we can see more of the data fields within the Stock Viewer. And I'll point out that there are currently 9,203 stocks in the U.S. database. We've sorted them all VST descending. So we brought to the top of the list the stocks that have the strongest combination of relative value, relative safety, and relative timing reflected in their VST score. And so you see you're ever only 3 clicks away from finding the best stocks for you. And when I say for you, I mean easily find the stocks that align with your investment objectives using the VST analysis and CI. But first, let's set you up for success with some background information. I want to make sure you're clear on the definitions of our VST indicators and CI. So we're going to focus tonight right in the meat of the Stock Viewer with the VST analysis. So in that series of essays on the 16th, Angie wrote about RV. She wrote, RV gives us the ability to make a reasonable assessment of a company's future financial viability and upside potential relative to our benchmark of AAA corporate bonds. Like other VectorVest proprietary indicators, RV is cast on a scale of 0 to 2. If RV is greater than 1, future price appreciation is favorable and should outperform the bond over time. If RV is less than 1, future price appreciation is unfavorable. So in Todd speak, I like to shorthand that and say RV is upside potential. Next comes relative safety, or RS. RS, Angie writes, is an indicator of risk that's computed from an analysis of the consistency and predictability of a company's financial performance. Debt-to-equity ratio, sales volume, business longevity, price volatility, and other factors. It's calculated on a scale of 0 to 2, with values above 1 being favorable and values below 1 being unfavorable. The higher above 1, the safer the stock is, and vice versa. Buying high RS stocks is a surefire way to achieve long-term investing success, says Dr. D. Our next indicator is relative timing, or RT. Angie writes on February 2nd, RT is an intelligent measure of a stock's short-term price trend. It's computed from an analysis of the direction, magnitude, and dynamics of a stock's price movement, day over day, week over week, quarter over quarter, and year over year. A stock is in an uptrend when the RT is greater than 1, and in a downtrend when the RT is less than 1. The closer you get to the extremes of 0 and 2, the stronger that trend. And remember, unlike RV and RS, RT is only looking at price. And so we bring that analysis together in our VST Vector indicator, our master indicator. VST Vector combines RV, RS, and RT into a single comprehensive indicator. This combination incorporates fundamental and technical analysis all in one indicator. So remember, our VST is our default sort anytime you see a list of stocks in VectorVest. It's bringing to the top of the list the stocks that have that best combination of relative value, relative safety, and relative timing. Now, outside of the VST system, we also have an indicator called Comfort Index, or CI. Angie writes, CI is also an intelligent measure of a stock's price trend, but it's different from RT in that it reflects a stock's ability to resist severe and/or lengthy price declines. Where RT measures the short-term price performance, CI measures the long-term price performance. It's measured on a scale of 0 to 2 as well, with values above 1 being favorable and values below 1 being unfavorable. It's also a purely technical indicator. So now that we've defined the indicators, let's use them to help us find stocks that we like to trade. Earlier, I indicated you can easily find stocks that align with your investment objectives. This graphic helps explain what I mean. This is what we call the investment matrix. We identify 4 types of investors reflected in their combination of risk and reward profile. So, set it up. On the bottom, we have risk. On the side, we have reward. On the risk scale, we go from low risk to high risk. On the reward side, we go from low reward to high reward. So each of these boxes reflects a different combination of risk and reward, or your particular risk-reward profile, which we often will call your investor temperament. For example, in this upper left box, this would reflect a combination of low risk and high reward. There are 4 types of investors that we identify: aggressive, conservative, prudent, and speculative. Each will be represented by a different combination of risk and reward. The investor that belongs in this top left box doesn't want to take a lot of risk, but he or she still wants above average returns. They'll look for fairly safe stocks that have a lot of upside potential. Now, who do you think that is? Yes, that person is prudent. The investor that belongs in the top right box wants high returns over time and is willing to take on a little more risk to get it. They try to take advantage of faster acceleration in the stock's price. They look for stocks with a lot of upside potential more so than safety. So who do you think that investor is? Well, if you said aggressive, you're right. The investor that belongs in the bottom left box favors safety more so than upside potential. They look for companies that have been around for a while and have consistent and predictable earnings. While these stocks may go up some over time, that's not the major consideration. Often this investor will like dividends, which is why the company's financials are the biggest consideration. So if you think that sounds like a conservative investor, you're right on target. The last investor is speculative. They're not concerned with financials. They take a lot of risk, and over time, while they may hit on an occasional home run, more times than not, they'll lose and have little reward to show for it. The stocks they choose are typically very volatile and have very little upside. Typically, we're choosing unproven companies that usually have a new product that may be released on the market, and they're hoping for a huge payoff. So these investor profiles are reflected in a combination of relative value and relative safety scores. Now remember, both of these indicators are on a 0 to 2 scale. Above 1 is favorable. So stocks that have a high reward have RV scores greater than 1, the upside potential. Stocks that have low upside potential will typically have RV scores less than 1. And we're generalizing here. Let's not be overly scrupulous. If the RV score is at 0.99 or 0.98, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a conservative stock. So let's use these as guideposts in our analysis. Stocks that have high risk will have RS scores less than 1. Stocks that have low risk or higher safety will have RS scores greater than 1. Therefore, an aggressive investor will look for stocks with a high RV and a lower RS. So the concept to keep in mind here is that the aggressive investor is favoring RV or upside potential. They're looking for big gainers and stocks with high upside potential. The prudent investor wants the best of both worlds, high reward but also low risk. The prudent investor wants RV and RS scores both to be above 1. And by the way, that's where most investors fall. A conservative investor is favoring safety over upside potential. They want high RS stocks. They're not terribly concerned about how much the price is going to appreciate. Of course, you still want to favor stocks that are stable to rising, but we list that as RV less than 1 and RS greater than 1. And finally, a speculative investor is looking for those big gains without regard to fundamentals. So using this information, you'll be able to easily assess your favored stocks. So back we go to the stock viewer. VST is our default sort. So this sort has brought to the top of the list the stocks that have the best combination of relative value, relative safety, and relative timing. We can also optimize the sort by cherry picking or tagging other data points such as RT or CI. Look for positive earnings or earnings growth rate. Do they pay a dividend? We can tag just by holding down the control key to tag individually. Or if you hold the shift key, you can tag a whole series. And so that concept is true for all of the sorts I'm going to show you tonight. So top VST stocks are great for prudent investors looking for RV and RS scores above 1. Just look at our data points. All those RV and RS scores are above 1. All of these stocks are in uptrend. They have VST scores well above 1. In fact, everybody's above 1.4. And they all have CI scores well above 1. So both the short and the long-term trends of price are positive. So once you've sorted and or cherry-picked from the stock viewer, Dr. DeLito suggests the next thing you want to do is take a look at a graph. And particularly for prudent investors, we want to favor stocks with persistently rising price and earnings patterns. We call this technique VectorVest Simple. So I'm going to come up to the top of the list. I'm just going to click Graph All. Using the VectorVest Simple methodology, we first want to change our layout to VectorVest Simple. And here we're looking for graph patterns that have persistently rising price over time, driven by persistently rising earnings over time. So let's take off RT and the VectorVest stop price. And from this view at a 1-year time frame, we're simply looking for stocks that have that structure. Not only do we want to see price going bottom left, upper right, but we like to see it going bottom left, upper right, smoother the better. Not a lot of volatility, just persistently rising. So as we scroll through these stocks, I'm only going to give you a couple seconds to look at each chart. If you like the pattern, you write it down. Pencils down. So if you're like most folks, some of those graphs looked really good to you, and some of them didn't look very good at all, and some of them were not sure. Well, in VectorVest Simple, we want to see only the stocks that we had a positive yes. If you're not sure, if you're in doubt, leave it out. I did want to come back here to POWL. One of the things we like to avoid doing is buying stocks that have gone parabolic or have just recently gapped. On this more prudent kind of position time frame, often we see, and we just saw that on some of the tech stocks this past week, when you have this parabolic move, we often see a retracement from that move, a sell-off into the move, or we can see some consolidation as well. But we like to avoid the risk of that pullback. We also like to avoid stocks that are approaching resistance. And to see that, you can add the parameter, technical analysis, support and resistance. Just put that on the chart. And let's avoid buying stocks that are approaching resistance until they've broken out or broken through. Okay, so once you have chosen your favorites from those graphs, then we want to put them on a watch list and look for their follow-through, continued uptrend of both the market and the stock on the next market session. So those were top VST stocks. Back in the viewer now, let's go to RV and we'll click on it once and resort the whole list of 9,000 stocks, RV descending. So this gives us a slightly different view as we're favoring the upside potential. So this is great for growth investors, right? Look at some of these growth rates, earnings growth rates here in the GRT column. But notice how some of these have RS numbers now that are below 1. So if the RS is low, then we might expect there to be a little more volatility in the price action of the stock graph. I also noticed that because I'm focusing on RV, there are some that have RT values below 1, meaning they're actually in downtrend. Some even have sell ratings. So here's a situation where I would probably want to use my cherry picking technique, the tagging technique, to avoid some of those stocks. So let's cherry pick for positive short-term trends, RT above 1. So I'm going to tag everybody in the list, holding the shift key. I'll tag them all. And then I'll deselect anybody with an RT value. I'm holding the control key down. I'm going to deselect any stock that has an RT value below 1. Now I notice there are a couple in here still that have CI scores below 1. So the longer term trend is down. The shorter term trend is up. So they've made their turn. So I might see a graph pattern that's actually pulling back and has just started to rise. So I'm going to leave those in there for now. If you like, of course, you could eliminate those and look only for both short and long-term trends to be intact. But now instead of graphing all, let's just graph the selected. And we're starting with NVIDIA. You might expect to see some overlap between these two lists. But as I scroll through the charts, I still want to see that upward price progression, particularly driven by rising earnings. But I might see a little bit of noise and accept a little bit more noise in the signal, in the price action, a little more volatility. Here's an interesting example. FIHL was added to our database in July. So we're graphing the data that we have, but we see that most recently, from the end of last year, we have been in an uptrend, even though we're about flat since we entered it into the database. I'm going to add a parameter here, and let's add that CI indicator, just so I can see the data point. So the long-term trend is down, but the short-term trend is up. And so here we're seeing a reflection of that stock that's pulled back, but now has resumed uptrend by virtue of the short-term trend analysis. So it fails the test of a VectorVest Simple graph pattern. It might be more suitable for someone who's more aggressive. And pencils down. So again, write down the symbols of the stock price patterns that you liked. Put them in a watch list or write them down and look for follow through the next day. Our next sort is by RS. So now we brought to the top of the list the stocks with the best safety analysis. Remember, Dr. Dolito said buying high RS stocks is a surefire way to achieve long-term investing success. So again, great for prudent investors, particularly if you see an RV number above 1. but still acceptable for conservative investors if RV is below 1. And I do notice that the growth rates, while still some in double digits, a little bit lower than we saw on the RV sort. Again, because we're focusing on relative safety, we're not really considering what the current trends for the stock are. So let's cherry pick from the list only the stocks that are in currently short and long-term trends. Holding the Shift key, I tag them all. Holding the Control key will take out anybody whose RT value is below 1 and whose CI value is below 1. Of course, here, this would be a favorite for conservative investors, so you may want to look also at our dividend analysis, where we apply the same vector formula from VST to the dividend analysis, yield, safety, and growth. But let's graph all of these guys. Remember, the benchmark for high RS scores is consistent financial performance. So we're looking at these EPS graphs. We ought to have very nice looking curves, particularly even over the long term, going to a 5-year graph. So for these longer term holds, let's look for and favor those longer term trends in earnings. And so again, as we cherry pick through the list, some will be better than others. But overall, fantastic candidates with persistent earnings performance, which is the hallmark of persistently trending price. So those are some of the safest stocks in our database. Again, put your favorites in a watch list or write them down. Look for follow-through the next day when the market's rising and the stock is rising. You'll often hear us refer to these kinds of stocks as ruler stocks because of that earnings price pattern where you could just lay a ruler on the earnings pattern and it's going consistently higher. Our next sort is by RT. So here we're purely looking at price trend. And what I notice as I look at this sort, lots of stocks that are more speculative with weak fundamentals, but mixed in there are some prudent stocks as well. So some things to look out for, particularly when you're looking at price movement. Sometimes you can get some pretty low dollar stocks over here, or even pink sheet stocks. Notice how the fundamentals aren't necessarily there with negative growth rates and even negative earnings. You also want to look out, I notice I have some leveraged ETFs, and if I scroll to the right, you also want to make sure you have average volumes that will provide enough liquidity for your account. That being said, let's take a look at some graphs, also noting that some of the long-term trends are pretty weak here. But the speculative or very aggressive trader is playing that price action. Fundamentals are less of a concern. So let's take a look at the graphs. And you can see right off the top, this is not a VectorVest Simple kind of stock selection. The trader's really playing the harder right edge of the graph. Fundamentals are less of a concern. They're going to look for graph patterns, and they may well graph a much shorter time frame than the 1 year we would look at as a starting place for a prudent kind of investor. So as we scroll through these charts, you have fast price appreciation here, right? Fast price moves, and that is just music to the ears of all the traders out there in the room. Again, traders typically will have their own technical setups that they might apply to some of those graphs. And finally, let's sort the list by CI. So remember, CI, just like RT, is a price-borne technical indicator. So I notice that I have some speculative stocks here, even though I have a high CI score. So just because it has a high CI score does not necessarily mean that it has strong fundamentals. There is obviously some overlap. So cherry pick to your heart's content, look at the graphs. And what you'll find is when you have a high CI rating, that sweetens all trend-based approaches. So let's take a look at their graphs. So American Coast, persistently rising price over the last year, even though fundamentals show they're still losing money. Interesting here on CBAY, notice the flat price action here after the gap. That often is a reflection of a merger or acquisition. So you might want to do some more investigation on that particular stock. But as we scroll through, here's a stock that has some fundamental strength. So those are high CI stocks, and of course you can cherry pick to your heart's content the other data fields that you prefer. And it's easy to add CI to any of the sorts that you like with our cherry picking techniques. So remember our mantra, VectorVest advocates buying safe, undervalued stocks that are rising in price in a rising market. So let's remember to look for rising markets as indicated by our market timing system before we take these long positions. So to wrap it up, most of us will fall squarely in the VST or RS sort, but VectorVest provides the analysis and information to help anyone find the right stocks for them in just 3 clicks. Thank you for watching and have a great night.